mineral export. And the main importers are in Northeast Asia. And the number one investors in Central Asia are Japan, South Korea, and China. So there are the economic interdependence and cooperation, but there are no mechanism, flexible mechanism to talk about all these interactions. So it's the idea to build this multilateral dialogue architecture so that for Mongolia it would increase its diplomatic visibility and prove that it's, although it's organizing this multilateral dialogue mechanism, it would be seen by all the great powers as a neutral and without any hegemonic ambitions. So it will be feeling secure for all the parties involved, even though we are located between China and Asia. Thank you.
Thanks very much, panelists. I just wanted to introduce a couple of terms into the discussion. Also, this partly relates, I think, to the keynote speech by Professor Landa. To what extent any of the panelists see what they're doing as contributing to a decolonial or decentering sort of perspective on the world. Any kind of comparison between regions, for example, also enters into sort of discussions about the asymmetries of relationships between regions, which have influence on the way in which we look at them and power relations within knowledge and so forth. So, just it's striking that nobody mentioned those words from my point of view.
Just a quick remark. I'm repeating it again. It's just a kind of an outsider sort of perspective of Latin biases. But Carpenter also talks about politics that I did not include here, and politically he says that they're all kind of catastrophic because they live under kind of autocracies and monarchies. But there is this kind of a spirit that is ongoing that could make some revolutions, especially with reference to China, and talks about that. But politically, I think despotism, authoritarianism, all these things are very, Western-centric generalizations that are made during that time period, and that kind of scope of colonization, imperialism, and regarding America's expansion and the idea of bringing American democracy to all those places. So it is not very authentic, I would say, compared to other sort of sources with regards to. But again, it sees it as a sort of a unified, blend of autocracy and despotism. That's all I can say. No big comparisons, but more reference to China.
I guess I have two things to say. One is the fact that Japan's sort of a very, sort of semi-imperial position. In a sense, it's a full-fledged empire, and at the same time, the intellectuals didn't feel like they had this full agency in producing their own form of knowledge, right? And that is particularly evident when we think about the sources a lot of Japanese Pan-Asianists use to talk about the Middle East. Is we don't see the institutional development at Japanese universities to teach Persian, Arabic, Turkish until the 1930s and 40s, and therefore most people were using French, German, and English sources to write about the Middle East. So the question becomes how to reframe the Orientalist sort of biases in these European language sources. So that's why I'm sort of emphasizing the very creative reframing of narratives using the same European sources. But admittedly, I think my talk was clear on sort of Japan, how the production of knowledge about the Middle East was, even among those who were not directly involved in imperial policy-making circles, it was still very much correlated with Japanese imperial expansion. And in terms of more comparative aspects, it's not just Japan, the Japanese thinkers that were thinking, imagining Asian civilization as something more expansive. It's sort of somewhat problematically, I created a separate project that talks about Iranian thinkers who were starting to imagine Asian civilization as something that stretches from the MENA region, Middle East and North Africa, all the way to Japan. And there are good examples, Iranian poet Sohrab Sadeghi, who argued that Buddhism and Sufism are essentially the same thing. So it's still have to sort of figure out what they're reading together, what kind of shared sort of texts, shared imagery that they're referring to. But there's definitely sort of a simultaneous contemporaneous rise of this notion of Asian civilization as Japan all the way to North Africa and the Middle East, wrapping around the 20th century. So there's a lot of room for comparative studies.
Are you happy? Yeah. Do you have any follow-up? Oh, right. A gentleman in the back.
Yeah. Hi, this is Ashish. Thank you very much for your wonderful presentation. But the difficulty with the idea of pan-Asianism is this, to my mind, that the intra-ethnic or intra-civilizational fault lines, and especially in this age of competitive populism and everything. Now the problem is this, that these intra-civilizational fault lines, they can be thick as well as thin. Now it depends on the context. Now the context is such that, and the biggest difficulty in Asia is this, that we have overlapping nature of identities. So we have to make constant choices. So which identity should I really belong to? So this contestation with regard to belongingness, that creates these boundaries, and when we particularly emphasize on a particular identity, a particular form of belongingness, that creates this boundary very thick, solid. And that solidity of intra-ethnic boundary or intra-civilizational boundary, that makes life very, very difficult. And that's the biggest challenge, I guess, when we think of pan-Asianism. So it's a brief comment. Thank you.
It's the ideas of these historical actors in research. And I should probably emphasize that even though they do claim this sort of similarity of Asian civilization, I mean, just like any sort of a larger unit of identity, it's clearly hierarchical, right? A great example is how a lot of Japanese sort of spiritualists who imagined Islam to be part of Asian civilization claimed that all different religions, or all major religions, are different expressions of one ultimate truth, but ultimately many of them believed Shinto is the original form, and other religions like Confucianism or Islam are older forms of that ultimate truth, right? So the reference point is very much depending on where they come from. Just like any other forms of pan-Asianism, it was clearly sort of hierarchical.
Lady to the right.
A very good afternoon. A very good afternoon to all the esteemed chairs and the paper presenters. Well, my attention also goes to Dr. Mikaya, and it's not a question or a query, but it's something which I thought about. Your presentation was very excellent, and you drew your attention towards the political hegemony and also the barbarism which the Asian countries inflicted, and also the victimized. And you, in the end, you talked about the Jallianwala Amritsar incidents. You also talked about the dignity and the enigmatic of the Taj Mahal, which is one of the jewels of India. And it was really very, it is very touching to hear this. And once you come to know about the Jallianwala Bagh incidents in Amritsar, you will get goosebumps. Everyone, once you hear about it, once you know about it, anyone will get goosebumps. So this is what I wanted to say. Thank you so much.
So I study, I'm looking at a project about translations and how circulation of ideas and knowledge was rooted from or through translations of text. And so I'd like to ask Purcell. So we came to know that Mr. Carpenter is a quite renowned author. I just wonder whether he translated or the Asian languages that he came to know, Korean, Chinese, and Japanese, and then if I may, I would extend these questions to Professor Koyaki as well. How, the translation of East, West, Islamic, Japanese text was reflected through this kind of, Asianism.
Thank you. My name is Ellen Yang from Taiwan Exchange Foundation. I have two questions to seek for your advice. Do you see, number one, do you see this Mega Asia discourse or other perspective as regional responses to the US-led political configuration of the Indo-Pacific practice? I think that's the number one question I would like to learn from you. And to follow up, the second question is there any tangible mechanism to accommodate these various configuration of the Asian, of the imagination of Asia in Asia or in Northeast Asia? So I'm thinking, since there are various practice and configuration of the Asia, is there any mechanism or institutional framework to accommodate those, to coordinate, and then to chart a more concrete pathway to move forward together? I would like to learn from you. Thank you very much.
Detail. Carpenter is not one of those writers. He couldn't speak in the languages of these places, but he always collaborated with locals, with good locals. For instance, in Korea, there was a General Park who made translations for him. There was an illustrator who created illustrations about everyday life in Korea and Seoul, because these people received letters from embassies or top kind of diplomats roaming around in Asia, and they carried those things as their references. And they got in touch with good, top native people. So that's how they delved into, the sort of this national sort of environment, or local environment, to put it more correctly. And they used translators, good translators who could speak very well in both languages. But he didn't translate anything, unfortunately. His works were not also translated in any other languages, mainly written for the American public and sort of low class, not low class, but middle low class sort of people. Not, excellent type of literature, but very informative and good children's books. So they were, given as references to children. I think it is important to, educate or indoctrinate the coming sort of generations. But that's what I know about this whole thing. But that's an interesting aspect. I wrote it down.
Thank you for the question. So most of the text that I talked about, well, in terms of the text the Japanese authors produced, they were not sort of translated and circulated to other countries, right? So that's the interesting part of what I mentioned earlier about potential comparative studies. So there are similar ideas circulating, but there's no sort of direct intellectual exchange. So if you think about the sort of a notion of shared racial ancestry between Turks and the Japanese, the Turks are talking about the same thing, but they typically relied on European languages. And oftentimes, the local interpretations were slightly different from the European original sort of theory. So in different Asian contexts, there is some sort of local engagement with sort of how to reinterpret, reframe the notion of like racial hierarchy and where they belong. And in terms of the text the Japanese authors used, as I mentioned, it's a lot of European translated text, but India becomes a really important here because India is where in the 19th century interreligious exchange was so intensive, right? Because of the presence of missionaries and various religious political debates that happened between Muslims and Sikhs and Hindus. And, so India produced a lot of texts. Educated Indian Bengali intellectuals produced a lot of texts about this sort of about their sort of authentic religious tradition in response to the political discourse that happened. And the Japanese authors very much relied on those texts. Yeah.
Any of you would like to take on the last question in the Pacific? Right.
Referring to the last question from Taiwan, the first question is not about US economy in Asia, but it's a competition between financial capital of different countries. Chinese financial capital, European financial capital, and American financial capital. They're in trade, and the logic of their behavior is the logic of financial capital trying to return to real assets. This is the core, the basic of all the major contradictions in Asian region or around the globe. And concerning the unification of Asia, first, technically, if we imagine that there can be unity, this unity can appear two times. First, as a unified, centralized economic basis in Asia. If there is a common joint economic basis, then there will be possibility for some kind of political unity or peace. Without unified economic basis, only based on values, identities, it's impossible to develop any form of joint, some kind of solidarity, stuff like that. And technically, in East Asia, if we remain, for example, on the level of East Asia, then the problem of China. Because if everything remains like this, the East Asia can be unified only around China, basically. Because traditionally, for thousands of years, all countries, without exception in East Asia, they developed, they formed, whether as pro-Chinese or anti-Chinese. So this is my view on your question.
Well, thank you for the question. Insofar as the first question that whether it is a regional response to the US-led Indo-Pacific concept, I would like to say, as I mentioned in the presentation, it is very much a part of the Indo-Pacific concept, and it may be viewed as a construction which is anti-hegemonic and, of course, inclusive and developmental. And regarding whether there is any institutional mechanism for accommodating the various these competing, these are actually very cross-cutting intersectional concepts, as I tried to outline, where the IMEX comparison to BRI, or there are several other such corridors which are being envisaged or already are in operation. So to my mind, it would impinge on the members who would like to become a part of these constructions, that depending upon their interests, what would serve their best interests for connectivity, sustainability, trade, transport, and of course, freedom of the seas. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. In my opinion, whether it's US-led association or it's China-led, Russia-led, So it's all fragmented. It's developing different silos without interactions. So my idea is that the NECADA could be a very flexible and open mechanism that would overreach across different blocks to start the dialogue. So for China, we are not conflicting because we are not against the Belt and Road initiatives or digital Silk Road. We are supporting and harmonizing. For Russia, it's not the platform that are started initiated by the Western country, so it's not threatening the Russian security interests. For Europe and US and Western allies, this platform is hosted by a democratic country, so which is also, we can have a common language. For Japan and Korea, this would offer great engagement opportunities with Central Asia outside China-led frameworks. So this provides, alliance with interest of multiple actors, and they can start, from small. We shouldn't become like international organization. We can just start small by just international discussions, technical forums, soft law negotiation and stuff like that. Maybe joint research platform. So, and then once the trust is built, then we can move on to the next level. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mendes. I think I'll take the liberty to end panel here. And then you have more than an hour, yes, till 1:45 for charging up and meeting up with each other. And once again, thank you very much for this.